Worksheet day 3 is going to start out with finding the common denominator so that you can add or subtract fractions. So when I'm finding the common denominator, I'm finding the least common multiple of my denominators. If you can't think of it right away, what I do is I start with the bigger denominator, which is 10. Does 8 divide into 10? No. So I think of the next multiple of 10. 2 times 10 is 20. Does 8 divide into 20? No. So I think of the next multiple of 10, which is 30. Does 8 divide into 30? Nope. So I do my next multiple. 40. 8 does divide into 40, so 40 is going to be what you want to use for your common denominator. So start with the bigger denominator and start listing the multiples until you find one that the smaller one goes into. Now I have to make my equivalent fraction like I did on the previous page. 10 goes into 40, 4 times 8, 32. So I would have 32 40ths. 8 goes into 40 5 times. So 6 times 5 is 30. So I have 32 40ths and 30 40ths. After you do the basic ones like this, then they're going to have you start adding those together. So I would add the numerators and get 62 40ths and rewrite that as a mixed number if I need to. But they're going to just start out by having you make the equivalent fractions. Then they're going to start having you add your numbers together. So on number 2, again, wanting you to find your common denominator, I have 8 and 9. 9 is my bigger one, so I'd start with 9. 8 doesn't go into 9. 9 times 2 is 18. 8 doesn't go into 18. 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 6 is 54. 9 times 7 is 63. And 9 times 8 is 72. Now maybe you recognize that 9 and 8 didn't have any common factors to begin with. If your denominators don't have any common factors, your least common denominator is just found by taking the 8 times the 9. 8 times 9 is 72. So that you can then make your equivalent fractions. 8 goes into 72 9 times, so 2 times 9 would give me 18 on top. 9 goes into 72 8 times, so 8 times 8 is 64. So if you look at it right away and say, oh, I don't have a common factor like the previous one did, it had a 2, I can just multiply them together to find my common denominator. So on the test gen worksheet generator, it doesn't always give me every kind of problem that you see. It's just giving us these ones where you practice finding your common denominator here. Again, 12 and 5 don't have any factors in common. They don't have anything you can divide into both of them. So your least common denominator is just going to be the 12 times 5, which is 60. $12 goes into 60 5 times. 5 times 7 is 35. 5 goes into 60 12 times, so 12 times 4, 48. So again, first starting out doing that, and then once you do a few of those, it's going to have you really start adding them. So I'm just going to continue with this one. If it told me to add, then I'm going to go ahead and add. So 5 plus 8 would be 13. 3 plus 4 is 7, plus the 1 is 8, so I get 83 over 60ths. When you have improper fractions, they're going to have you write the mixed number. So 60 goes into 83 one time. I get 23 left over, so I have 23 60ths, so 1 and 23 60ths. So it'll have you start doing some of these, but eventually it'll get to the point where it tells you to add them together and then write your answer either in simplified form or as a mixed number. So when you subtract fractions, the process is the same, but they're not going to have you start out by doing all that stuff where you have to find your common denominator first. And so you still need to find the common denominator when you subtract. Again, I have an 8 and a 7, nothing in common, so I just multiply them together. 8 times 7 is 56. So I'm making my common denominator. I like to just write one big fraction because that's what it's going to be. 8 goes into 56 7 times. So I take 7 times that numerator. 9 times 7 is 63. 7 goes into 56 8 times. So I have the subtraction. 2 times 8 is 16. So now my problem becomes that I have to subtract 63 minus 16. 63 minus 16 is going to give me 47. Then it says if you need to reduce it to lowest term. So I would try to see if 47 and 56 have any common factors. I don't believe they do. And so that's just going to be my answer. So again, if I'm checking this with my calculator, I'm doing 9 fraction eighths minus 2 fraction sevenths, and it's not going to give me the work in between, but I can see I got 47 over 56, so I have the same answer I did when I did it paper pencil. I must have the right answer. Here I have a 10 and a 6. Now these ones have a common factor. They're both divisible by 2. So I know that 10 times 6, 60, isn't the lowest one. So I think about my multiples of 10. 6 doesn't go into 10. 6 doesn't go into 20. Oh yeah, but 6 goes into 30. So 30 is my least common denominator, and that's what I'm going to want on the bottom of my fraction. 10 goes into 30 3 times, so I have to take 3 times 14, which would be 42, minus 6 goes into 30 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. So I'm going to have to subtract 42 minus 15. 42 minus 15 gives me 27. So I get 27 thirtieths. I want to make sure my answer is in lowest terms. This one I can reduce. Hopefully you recognize 27 and 30 are both divisible by 3. So 27 divided by 3 is 9. 30 divided by 3 is 10. So 9/10 would be my answer in lowest terms. And again, if I check it with my fraction calculator, 14 fraction tenths minus 3 fraction sixths, I get 9/10 on my calculator. So again, it's not going to show you work in between, but you will be able to check to see, oh, did I get my right answer in lowest terms? Now some people, instead of making that big long fraction like I did, like to line when they're adding and subtracting up and down. So I'm going to just line this up the other way. 13/10 minus 1/3. So they can see a little easier what they're doing, like they were doing in those boxes. My common denominator here is going to be 30, because 10 and 3 don't have anything in common. I can just multiply them together. 10 goes into 30 3 times, so 3 times 13 would be 39. 3 goes into 30 10 times. 10 times 1 is 10. So 39 minus 10 would be 29 thirtieths. Again, I can't reduce that one down, so I would just go ahead and say, yep, that's going to be my answer. So checking that out, 13 fraction tenths minus 1 fraction 3, I get 29 over 30, and it checks out. Now when I'm multiplying fractions, I don't have to have a common denominator. In fact, I don't want a common denominator. I just multiply across the top and I multiply across the bottom. However, you can do that and reduce at the end, or if you want to make your number smaller, you can reduce before you do it. So I'm going to do it both ways. One way is just to go ahead and multiply first. 1 times 3 is 3. 6 times 5 is 30, and then reduce. I can divide by 3 here and by 3 here. I get 1 over 10. Got my answer. The other way to do it is if you have a common factor between the top and the bottom, you can reduce before you multiply. I can't reduce the 1 with the 5, but the 3 and the 6 are both divisible by 2, or by 3. 3 goes into 3 one time and into 6 2 times. Now I multiply across the top. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 5 is 10. I prefer to reduce first because then my numbers aren't so big, But if I forget to reduce first, I can always reduce after I'm done, make sure I'm in lowest terms. So again, if I do that on number 8, I have 3/5 times 5/6. The 3 and the 6 have a common factor of 3. 3 goes into 3 once and into 6 2 times. The 5 and the 5 are both divisible by 5. 5 goes into 5 once and into 5 once again. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. So I get 1/2 for my answer. And again, if you want to check these with your calculator, just do it the same way as adding, only we multiply. 3 fraction fifths times 5 fraction 6. If I hit equals, I get 1/2, 1/2. So 1/2 is my answer in lowest terms. So number 9, I can't reduce the 1 with the 4 and I can't reduce the 3 with the 7, so I just have to go ahead and multiply across the top. 1 times 3 is 3, 7 times 4 is 28. I can't reduce 3/28 down, so that's going to be my answer. Now my rule for dividing fractions is to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal just means you're flipping the fraction upside down. So I'm going to change the division to multiplication and flip the one after the division sign. So 1/2 divided by 1/6 is the same thing as 1/2 times 6/1. The reciprocal of 1/6 would be 6/1. Again, when I multiply, I could just multiply across the top and across the bottom, then reduce. I like to try to reduce first. I can reduce the 2 and the 6 down. 2 goes into here once and into 6 3 times. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 1 is 1. 3 divided by 1 happens to give me the whole number answer, and so I write it as a whole number, 3. Again, if you want to check those using your calculator, we just do our original problem, 1 fraction 2 divided by 1 fraction 6, and I get 3 on my calculator, which is how the appropriate form of the answer looks. One-fourth divided by 3/5. So I'm going to take 1/4. I'm going to change it to multiplying by the reciprocal of the one after the division sign. So 3/5 becomes 5/3. Can't reduce the 1 with the 3, can't reduce the 5 and the 4, so I just multiply. 1 times 5 is 5, 4 times 3 is 12, so 1/4 divided by 3/5 ends up being 5/12. And the last one on this page, again I'm going to divide, so I have to multiply by the reciprocal, so I'm going to have 1/6. First fraction's never going to change, times the reciprocal of the one after the division sign, 2/1. Can't reduce the 1's, but I can reduce the 2 with the 6. 2 goes into here once and into 6 3 times. So 1 times 1 is 1, 3 times 1 is 3, and so 1/3 is my answer in lowest terms. So that's the end of worksheet day 3. One more to be done with the fraction section, but again, if you want to go to your pie chart, see if you have any of those next 4 topics, and if you do, go ahead and do those first and then go on to the next worksheet.